the one on preemption. Oh,
Think so. I'll double check. I think I did. I'm like 99% sure I did.
oh, Dave, yeah, you should check it.
Okay, we should be live.
Good, okay, great. I'll call to order the September 3rd planning board of the town of Rochester. Pledge to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Stacy, would you call the roll?
Yeah, Chair Jones,
Here.
Member Nelson,
Here.
Member Duda. Here. Member Becherand.
Here.
Member Formal. Here. Member Pinsky.
Here.
Member Roberts is absent, and Dave Gordon and myself.
Dave Gordon's here.
And for
Christian
Christian.
is here for Greg Volner. And Dave Church is not gonna be here.
yes,
Alrighty,
all of these.
so. It's an easy agenda, only one item on the agenda, but I think it will be a late night in spite of that. What I'd like to do, and the primary purpose is to have Doug Fishman here with us. Doug is the gentleman to everybody's left. Well, to your right, to Zorian's right. So he's here as a result of a number of letters, but particularly one or two, and we received another one from Mr. Chamberlain, Dr. Chamberlain, who is an expert in RF electromagnetic radiation and its presence in cell towers in particular. And given the detail that he went into, Dr. Chamberlain went into, and some of the pushback to the letters by Brendan Hennessy. Brendan is the gentleman in the middle, and the letter by Doug Fishman. I thought we should spend one meeting talking about all of these comments and try to get to the heart of the matter. None of us are electromagnetic RF radiation, non-ionizing radiation experts, but we can certainly learn something. And I think the real issue is whether or not Verizon has done an adequate job in terms of the needs assessment in the area in which they want to put the new tower, whether or not they've adequately assessed that and presented us with the data to allow us to move forward, under the assumption that there is a need for another tower. So, before I go and get started with a series of questions that I developed, and I want the board to participate in these questions also, I just want to alert you to the letters that I've received since we last met on November 10th. So on 11, and I did give you a list of, I think, most of the letters in some degree of order, but the ones since November 10th was a letter from Scott Olson, actually from GSS, their biological firm, bio firm out of Texas, who has made the presentation to the government, to Fish and Wildlife, regarding the environment and also regarding the animals and plants in the area. That was dated 11/14, and essentially GSS contradicted the findings of Dr. Manville, who had sent us a letter on 10/25 regarding the effect of radiation on birds. Then on 11/15, we received one of Doug Fishman's letter in response to Kent Chamberlain's first letter. That happened on 11/15. On 11/18, we received a letter from Dave Gordon, our attorney, which was under the cover of attorney-client privilege. I waived the privilege and made it public because I think it's an important letter. It was on the issue of preemption, and essentially our attorney has advised us that the TCA, the set of laws that envelop towers and the management of towers, does not permit us to consider the effect of RF radiation on humans, flowers, animals, insects, or anything else. that's his conclusion. And I really go against our attorney overtly, at least. So, that's his opinion. And it's also, I agree with it. It was well reasoned and, thank you for that. Then there was a letter from Scott Olson, of 11/24, covering a letter from Brendan Hennessy, dealing with the claims by Kent Chamberlain's letter of 11/5. So we have two letters, Doug Fishman and Brendan Hennessy's letter dealing with RF needs analysis, or rather the engineering needs analysis as to whether or not that tower is actually needed. So we have those. And then just this past Monday, we received another letter from Kent Chamberlain, which is also up on Muni Collab, contradicting and challenging, disagreeing with both Doug Fishman and Brendan Hennessy's letters of the previous dates that I gave you. So it's a lot of letters floating around. And I'm smiling because I learned a lot, but my hair hurts. As you can see, I don't have too much hair. So anyway, I want to get into it. I did write a letter, to Doug Fishman. I copied you all on it, from yesterday, the 2nd. But I'm actually going to open it up to the board first if you want, rather than go through, my letter. I do want to apologize on behalf of myself, at least, to Brendan, for the letter that you received in the course of business here from the first letter from Dr. Chamberlain, that I consider to be not the bit of challenging your professional credentials, but just challenging means by which you got your professional credentials. It just hurt me to no end, because my journey to get my credentials were pretty much the same as yours. So maybe it hit a personal streak. So on behalf of me, and I assume the board, I just apologize for that. And I've been assured that it won't happen again, and I believe the assurances that I received. So we'll let that lay on the table and leave it there. So does anybody from the board want to start, or do you want to start with the letter that I sent out?
That's definitely good.
Okay. So Doug, the first thing I want to know is, for full disclosure purposes, can you just describe to us any relationships that you may have had in the past or currently with Verizon or with companies that have done work for Verizon? I just want that on the table for full disclosure.
Sure. First of all, I've never worked for Verizon. Secondly, the company that I left 3+ years ago, Verizon was a client. I was the engineering lead, and I worked with Verizon engineers mainly on in-building systems, but there was one outdoor system that we worked on with them, which is how I gained some of the knowledge about the planning tool they use and how they use it. And I think it's an important piece of knowledge to apply to an application like that.
So you mentioned their planning tool. I assume that the needs analysis tool is my term.
The ATOL tool.
The forced ATOL.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you consider yourself to have an intimate knowledge of the guts of that system,
No.
or just a passing?
No, very high level. I've never actually used the tool, but based on what the engineers that I worked with, that was probably close to 10 years ago with it. And what Verizon has said that, how they use it. That's how I know.
Okay. All right, so let's get right into it. I put it at each place also a copy of 30 some odd pages that were in one of the documents that we got from Verizon. Dave, you have one too, which to me is the essence of the needs analysis. It describes the terminology that they use, which could be useful to a neophyte. And it also has the various charts showing the over and underutilization of at the 700 megahertz and the 2100 megahertz. And at what point in the eyes of Verizon, it's time to look at providing additional capacity. And then if you keep flipping, There's an analysis of coverage, existing coverage at the different megahertz levels, proposed coverage with the new tower. And then there are even pictures and relationship to different focus areas in the area that they're trying to service better, including some areas on Pollyanna Place, Salata Olson, Upper Granite, Burn Road, Old Minnewaska, and other places. So we may have cause as a group to reference this later on in our discussions. So when I read the first letter from Kent Chamberlain, it was interesting and I didn't probably take too much time to understand a lot of the details. With the letters from Fishman and Mr. Fishman and from Brendan, and then the follow-up letter from Mr. Chamberlain, I started to gain a keen interest in all of the particulars. So, Brendan, I think for starters, I'll jump right into the middle. There's been a claim that the TCA only allows for Verizon, I may be misstating it, to put up another tower if there's a significant need for a significant lack of coverage. They also use the term, they use the term significant, they use the term densification. So would you describe for the board exactly what's significant, or Scott, if you want to jump in, Doug, you want to jump in, describe what significant means and what this term of densification means. And I ask about the densification because as we go forward and we look at the FCC broadband map, which was described to me by you, Scott, they use 350 meter bins or segments. You use 25, I think, meter bins. But the fact of the matter, within each of those home sites that have been identified, it does record as being 100% coverage. I'm wondering, well, what does it look like with the 25% bin coverage map? What does it look like with that? And do I really care whether the coverage is provided by Verizon, or it's provided by AT&T, or it's provided by T-Mobile, or provided by whomever? For the very simple matter that the town code doesn't talk about any one of those carriers. It talks about service in general. So why would I care which of the carriers provides that service? And I have to think, and I don't think we've ever asked this question, that the two other towers, Accord and Kerhonkson, those other arrays, array 2 and array 3, are not yours. There are some other carrier. I'd like to know which carrier they are, which begs the question then about a fourth array on those towers, or putting the 20-foot antenna at the top to create greater coverage. So for me, that's a mouthful and challenges my technical ability. But I'd like you to launch into a discussion of densification, significance of coverage. Who's on those other monopoles? Why should I care about what Verizon's coverage is? Why should I just care about, which is what the town code says, I should just care about carrier, or rather utilization or ability to utilize my phone effectively, regardless of whoever the carrier is. So
Can I jump in just because I think from the legal perspective, that kind of sets the stage and I can answer some of those questions. In terms of why should you care? You absolutely have to care because the law in New York is each carrier has a right and obligation to build out its own network. The fact that AT&T could have service in a certain area does not negate the fact that we have a right to build it out. Now, there's a Third Circuit federal case, I believe, that was done 15, 20 years ago that said the opposite, but New York has not adopted that. In fact, the FCC says specifically, you're paying billions of dollars for licenses. You have to build this out. So that's the legal answer to that one.
Scott, I'm sorry. You're saying the Third Circuit adopted an interpretation of the law that the FCC is blowing off and that New York State is basically following the FCC? And if so, what New York State decision is doing that.
So I'm
And
saying,
before that, who's the Third Circuit? Is that Washington?
No, it's
Is that New York
Philadelphia.
State?
yeah.
Philadelphia? Okay.
It's
Covers Pennsylvania.
In that in context, because a lot of people used to argue 10 years ago that, wait a minute, the law says if you have service, AT&T service in an area, Verizon has no right to be in that area. That was in the Third Circuit, 99% of the Third Circuit, but, so that's what their interpretation was.
So it's some sort of state law that they're interpreting?
I think it was just, I don't know the details, I just remember that was the argument that people were making. That law has not been followed, especially in New York. Just because AT&T may have service in a certain area. Doesn't mean we should go away, or you should not be concerned about it.
What authority do the states have to make their own to make their own interpretation, or their own procedures in the face of federal law from either the FCC or the appellate courts?
I think generally speaking, the states are preempted and left with the responsibility to simply conduct land use and zoning.
So, but they can, but on this particular matter of the coverage, the states are free to make different interpretations of the mandate coming from the federal government, whether it's the
No,
FCC.
I don't believe they are.
So you were saying the Third Circuit made a mistake.
It's not the first court that's made a mistake. Yes,
That's the
and,
other.
and this circuit has not followed it.
Second Circuit has decisions that are different than the Third Circuit's decision.
Correct. I believe they do.
Can you send me some of those cases? And also any FCC reaction that said we think the Third Circuit missed the boat and we're gonna do whatever it
I could
says.
see if there's anything like that. I don't know that they would have responded, but.
Well, the FCC saying we're gonna ignore, or not listening to the Third Circuit, but making an interpretation after the Third Circuit that's at variance with the Third Circuit, more in line with somebody else. Is that
I'll see
where we're going?
what's that?
Is that what you're saying?
I'm sorry, I was taking them right now. I'm saying
Did
is,
the FCC come out with an interpretive?
I don't know if they came out with an interpretive document. I'll take a look at some of the declaratory rulings and see if they mentioned it in there at all, because sometimes their declaratory rulings are intended to address some issues that come up, and so that, yes.
Send me the basis for what you
Yes.
presented.
Okay.
And Scott, I think it's important because I did go on to the FCC broadband site and I hit tilt on some of those home sites.
Yeah.
And I saw that it lists AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon, and it shows whether or not they have coverage or not. In fact, I did that after Chamberlain claimed that he had done it for a house or two at Salata, Odin, Olin, right? So I did the same thing. Now, granted, that's at the 300-meter
Right.
look-see, whatever it's called, bin, whatever. But it seems, so it's kind of important because it was pretty clear to me that some of these home sites, and I didn't do them all, some of these home sites, they had coverage. But it was coverage from AT&T.
Right.
Which gets to the point of, maybe you can explain, unless you have more legal points you want to make, you can explain who's on your two towers now and at what level, second level, third level?
Yeah, well, so I want to just address that though, because our position is, regardless of what the FCC broadband maps say, they're done for a different purpose than what we do it for. And the fact that you have usually in these large areas, and anyone, and I'll let the engineer speak to it, but from everything I've read from them, anyone that understands this would never use a 350-meter bin area to basically design a site. It just, as Mr. Chamberlain likes to say, it's science. And physics doesn't allow you to determine whether you have coverage or not. The FCC purpose is totally different than our purpose. So I just want to say that.
Well, do you have, at 25 bin levels, do you have 25 meter rather, sorry.
Yeah.
Do you have the information for each one of these home sites that we do have the 350-meter data for?
I think you'll see, it's probably in the maps, you'd have to just find on the map where it is. The point is that, and again, I don't want to be I'm not the engineer. But the point is that those FCC broadband maps, they over exaggerate, they, other words I'm missing, but they basically smooth out areas to make it look like it's totally covered when it's not. So I think if you looked at Brendan's propagation maps and were able to determine where that specific address is, you can color coordinate it and see, does it have service or not?
So I guess you're gonna need to convince me and maybe, I don't know whether the rest of the board, that the model, the Forsk Atoll model, takes into consideration your data at the 25-meter points and shows that there are significant gaps. I'm using the word significant, causing you to want to deal with that and or causing you to say, well, I have coverage, but I want to densify it for different kinds of usages at different bandwidths. Do you see where I'm going with this?
Sure, I think so. I can try to answer. So
Is
if
the
you look-
board okay with? Okay,
so
we're pursuing now meaning of significance versus improvement, right? That's what the question.
yeah, we don't have any responsibility around the word significance. I read the code, unless I missed it again. I even taught myself how to do a word search for the word significant. Pretty good, right? And I couldn't find it but once. So we have no responsibility around
I think it's
significance.
whether it's need, right? I mean, do they?
But it's need. They talk of need.
Versus improvement.
And at first, well, improvement is need. You have a need, so you improve. Anyway. So Brendan, convince me that around your coverage maps and your model, convince me that it's way worse. It's significantly worse than what the FCC broadband maps are showing.
sure. So if you take a look at our coverage maps provided in the.
Which
data-
page you on?
So you can pick any, we'll look at page 17. So this is showing basically coverage down to net 105 dBm RSRP, which is basically the signal strength level from the existing sites in the area. And this is on the 700 megahertz band, so the band that travels further covers more distance in general. You know, if you look at that and then you pull up some of these maps from the FCC, you can see that there's areas on our map that show white space. And that basically means, you know, based on the 20, and I believe it's 20-meter data that we use. Basically, there's these areas that do have no coverage or are weaker than neg 105 dBm in these areas. Whereas if you look at the FCC maps, they basically take, you know, 350-meter width of a hexagon, so the actual hexagonal area is much larger than that. And they basically average the, you know, and again, the other problem with the FCC maps is they don't say, hey, this is the signal level that we're using to determine this. They just say, hey, this has this 350 meter hexagonal area has coverage. Whereas if you look at our map, you know, 20, I don't know the math off the top of my head, but many 20-meter bins can fit inside that 350-meter hexagon. So our resolution is a lot higher, and that identifies more fine gaps in the network. So where these 350-meter hexagons sit, the average throughout that 350-meter area may constitute, and again, I don't know what signal level the FCC is using, you know, saying there's coverage there. But they're basically saying, hey, you have coverage here, whereas we're looking more granular, we're able to determine in 20-meter intervals what the coverage is predicted to be at those locations. So for instance, let's just take Route 4455 here on page 17. And then, you know, the road going north, you know, maybe Stony Hill up to the project area. Here you see a lot of white space. Whereas the FCC maps, they're showing these hexagonal areas where they're covering these areas where, yes, we're showing some coverage, and the averaging is saying, hey, you actually have coverage throughout this entire 350-meter area.
And the what page are you looking at for the FCC?
17.
No.
Oh, the
FCC,
FCC.
I mean,
That's in
I'm
the
not sure if there's
table
a
in the
direct
letter.
comparison, but I'm at Mr. Chamberlain's
Oh.
first letter,
Okay,
where he provides the actual images. Just as a reference.
I
Let me
have
see
that
if there's
letter.
one that matches the area that I'm actually referencing here as well. I think he's mostly focused on the site area here.
Page 11, is that what?
Yeah, 11, 10, 11, 12. So those are the FCC maps that Mr. Chamberlain is basically referencing. And so,
When he, let me be clear, when he shows a white hexagon, let's say on whatever road that is, my eyes are, Stonyfield Road, surrounded by purple. What he's saying is that this one hexagon has no coverage, but the rest of it's blue. Is that
so yeah, so if we're looking at page 11, is that the one you're looking at?
what I'm looking at?
Yeah, so basically this FCC map is saying, okay, within this one hexagon, you have no, and I think the map can change based off the percentage that you set too. So there's no reference to that. Actually, there is a color code here, map legend. So basically a bin with that color, basically no color is 0 to 20% coverage according to the FCC.
So
And-
his point is all the other hexagons are purple, but it's just this lone hexagon that's
Yeah,
in white.
he's basically claiming, hey, all these other hexagons have 80 to 100% coverage within that 350-meter area.
And your point is that the hexagons are too big.
They're too large to determine, finer details. So
But Brenda, this one hexagon that's in white is admittedly that area covered by ledges where
Mhm.
there is no, or there is no signal
Mhm.
occurring there.
Mhm.
That's the only hexagon area you're referring to, right? With no
But
coverage?
his point is that all the other ones are purple, so. it's
yeah,
covered.
we're just referencing this one
He's,
because.
he's
for a matter
Timmerman's
of
focusing on these and saying they're all covered.
Gotcha.
So if you look at page 12, all like the map on the bottom of the page, they're claiming there's 100% coverage throughout this entire area, or 80 to 100% according to the map, right?
And your argument is that it's faulty because they're all averaged.
Yeah, it's too large of an area to really claim that. And again, what signal level is that representing? Here, on like if we go to one of our actual signal strength maps, not the best ever, so page 19. We give 3 levels of coverage here. And then
Which page?
if you look on page 19 as a representation, it's a little hard to see, but we have green, yellow, and orange. And then that basically, those colors are defined by 3 different signal levels. And then on page,
But when you say defined by 3 different signal levels, you mean to say you need all 3 frequencies to be represented, otherwise it's a gap?
no, so they're not
Or
different
any-
frequencies. So this is 700 megahertz coverage only. So that's
Okay.
the frequency, but these are different signal levels. And then
Okay.
if you look at page,
Signal strange.
yeah, there's a page that defines basically the level of service you can expect. Page 15 basically defines the level of service you can expect throughout those color ranges. So dark green, we use in the height justification section of this, but not in the map that we were just looking at. So we'll just go with the green, yellow, orange, and white. So anywhere covered green or greater than or equal to -85 dBm typically serves suburban, single-family residential, and light commercial. Yellow is the next tier down, typically serves most rural, suburban, residential, and in-car applications. Orange, rural highway coverage, but here's the key, subject to variable conditions, including fading and seasonality gaps. So fading is a phenomenon that occurs when you're moving towards a site or away from a site. It can basically degrade the signal that you're receiving just based off the RF that you're receiving, and you're moving closer or further away from it. It's harder for devices to basically decipher that signal. And then seasonality gaps is basically now that it's winter, there's no leaves. When leaves have moisture in them, they basically absorb the RF signal, and it makes it a lot weaker in an area. So the orange, the areas that you see covered in orange are subject to those kind of conditions. So yes, even though there may be some areas that are covered in the orange tier, it's not what I would consider 100% reliable due to those factors. And I think that's important to keep in mind. And you know, as you look at the FCC map, it gives you one color, it doesn't give you signal strength. It just says, hey, you have coverage.
And I want to push, I want to just,
Yes, sir.
combine what Scott said. Are you also saying that in that one color with purple, that it could be any carrier? It's not, it's, so you're integrating with the coverage from all the carriers?
So it really depends on the map. So here you can see that the different maps that he has submitted in his first letter. There's a legend to the right of the map, like for instance, on page 11.
This is of the Chamberlain.
Yes, his first submission. Page 11, it does not specify any carrier to the right. So if you go to page 12 in comparison. If you look in the same area to the right of the map. You can see that this data is considering AT&T, T-Mobile, and Verizon coverage. If you go down to the next map on page 12, so the map on the bottom, this is only showing coverage for AT&T.
And I think the point of what we were making was, he's using these maps like a map that shows only AT&T to say Verizon doesn't need coverage, or Verizon has coverage there. That's just not true.
Or if AT&T has.
Well, it
coverage
makes
here, why
sense to,
doesn't
it
Verizon?
makes sense to me if the board, this board's responsibility is only to have coverage. It doesn't matter what the, which
Well,
carrier it is.
This makes the submittal from Scott that he's gonna send me pretty important, so I wanna see I want to see the
Yeah.
discussion, and you want,
Right, does the board? Does that make sense? Anybody from the board have it? If you have coverage,
I
Yeah,
think-
but it's different. It's
who
different.
cares who it's coming from?
Well, that's.
Yeah,
I
but
think there's-
everybody's
that's the
different
wrong
thing.
I think there's an important distinction to make because while yes, it's true that we have roaming agreements with the other carriers for 911 emergency calls. So if you're in trouble, you gotta dial 911. Verizon doesn't have service, but AT&T does. Yes, it will call 911 and you'll be able to reach those services. Where we're more concerned or where we should what we should consider is, let's say a family member has a family emergency and they try to contact you. You have Verizon, you're not calling 911, you're trying to contact them directly, no communication, et cetera. Situations like that, like emergencies don't just constitute 911 calls.
No, I guess the most salient argument would be Scott's that legally, I can't think the way I just spoke, namely, I don't care who's doing the giving the coverage. You're saying that that's not what the law says.
Think about it this way, you're not proposing it, but if that was the rule, you would have monopolies. Because
would have
then
what?
monopolies in various areas, and that's exactly what the TCA does not want. It comes right out and specifically says, we want competition. It's important to have competition. They want carriers in every area.
that seems like a pretty critical legal parameter for the board right now, so we'll need to understand what the interpretation of that is in New York State.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so that,
Can I make a comment? So,
Jen, just speak up a little.
sure, so we're talking about these larger 350 feet bins. And we're talking about, you know, maybe there is some other carrier that provides coverage. I guess the way I interpret all of that, and the question that comes to my mind is, if another carrier has coverage, that leads me to believe they have infrastructure to provide that coverage. Therefore, why are you not able to co-locate on existing towers versus constructing a new tower?
Jen, that's why I would ask them, who's on their other two towers?
So I assume there's an answer to that.
Mhm.
So
So, yeah, each carrier,
Exactly what Chamberlain is saying.
so each network provider, it's basically up to their discretion how to design their network. We may have different coverage objectives. So one site, AT&T may be pointing their antennas a completely different way than where we need to point our antennas to serve what we need to for our.
But who's on the Accord tower?
I don't have the drawings in front of me, but typically each level on the tower represents a carrier. So
So I assume you have the prime level.
I believe that's true, but
Can you get us that information as
Of
to
course.
who's on the Accord tower
yes, we could get you the information of where we are and who else is
and
located.
Cohasson Tower?
Yes, sir.
And then those towers, one is 160 and the other is 150, I think,
Sounds about.
high. Yeah. So there is the ability to have a fourth level of arrays, correct?
Verizon would never put two levels of arrays on the same tower for interference issues, so.
Well, you have three already. You have your own AT&T and T-Mobile.
Yes, we all operate on different frequency licenses
Right.
to avoid interference.
So Verizon would never put two on the same.
Correct.
Okay.
And I don't know that we own those towers, by the way.
Sorry?
I don't know that we are the owners of the towers, if that means anything. I believe that Homeland Towers owns at least one of them, maybe two of them.
Oh, okay.
So,
But could you get us
Yeah.
who's occupying which towers?
But if Scott, if Homeland Towers owns a tower that Verizon does not lease space on, and if there's space available.
we do lease space on, we are on both
Okay.
of those towers.
Yeah, we
You
know.
have three towers in your town. We are on two of the three. The third one is the City Hall Road
Yep.
Tower, which is 4 miles away and it's interceded by the Cohasson Tower. So here's City Hall Road, here's Cohasson, here's the area we're trying to cover. This tower, which we're actually going to try to go on, cannot provide service to this area.
And if it could, you'd be interfering with your own signal. then.
That's correct.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I'm not quibbling with your analysis of City Hall. And Doug, you basically agree that it's 4.5 miles away. It would interfere with the signals. You going on City Hall, as I understand it, is provide service to the northwest,
Correct.
right?
Yes.
So I'm not quibbling with that. I just want to know, actually, the board wants to know, is there any opportunity to increase your coverage on one of the other two towers? Question mark. And to the point that one of you made that you would never put two arrays on the same tower, you need to explain why, if that's the case. If you're on each one of those anyway, I need to understand why you wouldn't do that.
So it's the same reason you would never want to put two towers too close together. It's again interference. So we operate the same frequencies within a geographical area on the tower. So if they're too close, it creates what we call SINAR problems, and it prevents users from accessing the network. It decreases data speeds. It can make you drop calls. Sometimes it creates a phenomenon called ping ponging, where the phone can't decide which tower it needs to go to because it's confused. So I mean, if like, let's say for instance, a cord, we're at the top and there's room for a fourth at the bottom. If we were to put another level of arrays for us on the bottom, it's not, it would basically make that tower unusable at that point for Verizon, because now you're transmitting the same frequencies out of the same location, and it's gonna create massive interference. It would be something you would never do.
Okay, so I'm gonna hold you right there, and it's not that I don't believe what you just said, but we're paying a guy, our consultant here, to comment. Can you spend the next couple of minutes commenting on what we've heard so far? Not the legal stuff, but all the other, the coverage stuff, the interference stuff. Would you tell us as our consultant
Sure.
what you agree with, what you don't agree with?
Sure, so starting with the interference.
And speak up a little bit, Doug.
So, sure, sorry, starting with the interference question. Today's technologies, both 4G and 5G. The carriers are using signals that are all operating over the same frequency band. You know, whether it's a 10 megahertz or 20 megahertz wide channel, they're all using the same frequencies. So that's why you've got to be very careful in coordinating the locations of these sites, because where they overlap, you're going to have what he referred to as SINAR, which is really good signal to bad signal issues, right? Because you want to have what's called a dominant server in an area. That's where you get the best quality coverage, where you're served by one site much better than any of the sites around it. That's where you're going to get your clean channels. That's where you're going to get the greatest data throughput, best voice quality.
And is that accomplished by, there was one of the letters talked about the azimuth of the arrays. Is that accomplished by adjusting, from 120 to 210?
Yes, that helps. That helps because that helps steer the coverage so that you're doing just that. You're creating areas of best server, dominant server, as opposed to having big overlap between sites where you could start having these interference issues.
And if all these carriers are using the same bandwidths,
So let me correct you. Verizon within their network is using the same bandwidth, the same channels distributed over their sites to create ideally a homogeneous coverage to an area.
and so how do they avoid interfering with some other carriers' bandwidth?
Because they have distinct licenses and distinct areas within the frequency spectrum that they can operate.
So if they're transmitting at a particular bandwidth, would it be appropriate to say 700? Is it an example of bandwidth?
So 700 talks about the frequency
Sorry,
overall band.
right.
Which covers, 50, let's say 50 megahertz of spectrum. Within that spectrum, they break it up into channels.
All right, so if they have a license for a particular bandwidth or channel.
yeah.
Somebody else cannot,
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
so that's how they manage between the different carriers.
Yes, and that's why you can't put essentially a second site at the same location as an existing.
Because you interfere with yourself.
That's
Right.
right.
Okay. Okay, any other comments on?
So, I didn't disagree with anything he said, but just to add a little more color. I know the issue of co-location came up relative to, why if AT&T has coverage and they're on those two towers, don't you? It's because they really are an independently designed network. AT&T is going to be on that tower at a different height. They're gonna be using different antennas. They're gonna be using different transmitters. Their network is configured differently. There's a lot of differences that can cause variation. Whether, when you're on the same 2 or 3 sites. So it's really carrier specific when we look at coverage.
So it's not as simple as saying, we'll just put another set of antennas on this thing.
Exactly. Exactly, and that's why they go through this kind of analysis to say, okay, I need to cover, if you've got an area where you need to cover for capacity reasons, for coverage reasons, for combination like this, you want to be as close to that area as possible. That's going to give you the best result in terms of performance. And, if you're going through all this to build a tower, you want it to be a tower that's really going to meet all of your performance objectives.
So explain to me why, Brendan did a little bit of it. Why does the FCC want stuff that is highly subject to a lot of misinterpretation? Why do they want it done at 350 meters? Why don't they ask it? It's simpler to do.
Yeah, much less data to deal with,
Okay.
right? It's a much higher level because they're doing it across a huge area, right? So, it's just easier to map out. I mean, if you think about 350 meters is like 2/10 of a mile. It's a huge area when it comes to looking at the variability in coverage.
And I just want to.
So what I find mathematically, it escapes me. You're saying that they average it within that 350 by 350 area.
I don't even know, I didn't read whether they average it or they're just taking a sample within that area.
Because if they
That's
average it,
what is.
how could you possibly come up with 100%?
Right,
Right?
right.
It's got to be less than 100%.
Theoretically, yes, but again, they don't list any signal levels, they don't list how, when they did that, there's so many unknowns with it, and it's so.
So are they averaging, Brendan, or are they?
I'm not sure the answer to that, to be honest.
Am I wrong?
I know that I may have said that before, but to be
No,
honest.
it's all right.
Yeah, I don't-
It's in all the reports,
Yeah,
average.
I don't know if
average,
it's an
average.
average or like Mr.
But that doesn't make
said,
any mathematical sense,
if
does
they're
it?
pulling a sample, but yes, I agree with what you're saying.
If it's average of 100, then everything has to be 100.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So yeah, I'm not sure how they're formulating that 100%
Okay.
value on those online maps. But
Because they're not measuring, they're not producing signal strengths. So you can have a small strengths, high strengths, and everything 100, with an average, maybe less than 100.
right, and we don't know what signal threshold constitutes coverage as defined by the FCC, and maybe that is in their website a little bit deeper, but you know, we basically, in our maps, we define what the signal levels are, the frequency band. I think it's important to say that the FCC maps are generated off of data provided by Verizon, so we're not disputing the FCC maps per se, we're just saying the maps that the FCC provides and the maps that we provide are for very different reasons. The FCC maps are generally for consumers where, hey, I might be looking to move to an area. I'm curious what I can expect for wireless broadband service in this area. Let me go to the FCC map. It's very user friendly. Again, it's very layman. Everything's very simple. Coverage, no coverage. It doesn't get into frequencies. Whereas our maps, you know, we have smaller bins for higher granularity. You couldn't use the map that the FCC provides to design a network. You need that additional detail of frequency signal level in order to make the best decision for your network.
So some of the data that you have in this document, there was a series of arguments going back, or debates going back and forth between the experts, Doug, Brendan, and Mr. Chamberlain, having to do with approaching the dotted red line that goes through across one of the charts. And in every case that I looked at, not in every month, not in every time frame, but it looked like the 700 megahertz was over capacity according to your charts, but the 2100 was under. I mean, it was over slightly, except there were huge spikes here and there. I don't know what that was representing, whether that was representing holiday cool time or,
It could be an event in the area for which that site serves.
but the 2100, there wasn't a lot of variation, and it was under that dotted red line that you said was the capacity number that you should shoot for. Over it is a problem, under it is not a problem. Why is the 20, so again, why do I care about under capacity when you got a problem with the 700 megahertz, but you don't have a problem with the 2100?
Sure, so in general, the 2100 megahertz band doesn't serve as far and basically by function as many users. So in general, when you're talking about capacity, unless you're in a very dense urban area, it's going to be the low band that gets overloaded because it handles a majority of the geographical coverage. And another thing that needs to be considered as part of capacity is the efficiency of that service, right? So the further away, we call it edge coverage of a cell site. So the very, very outer limits to which that cell site can serve. Even if you're getting service out there, you are sucking up a lot more resources from that site in order to make that distant service work. So again, it's that 700 megahertz band that we're really concerned with because it reaches out far, it covers larger geographical areas, and it serves the cell edge, which drives up the resources of the site that are required to.
So is the 700 megahertz frequency the one used by cell phones?
700 and 2100 are.
And 2100. So it's just a matter of different ability to reach the distance. It
Yeah,
has
that's
nothing to do with if I'm downloading Netflix, I can only use 2100 or I can only use
both frequencies provide all the same services.
it's just a matter of distance.
Is the 2100 have a higher bandwidth?
Yes, 2100 has higher bandwidth, so typically we'll give you higher data speed, etc. But we don't limit certain services to a 700 versus 2100. It's just a matter of. Like, if you had an area covered by 700 megahertz with only 3 users in it, you're gonna get very high data speeds. It's when you get more users onto that low band, smaller bandwidth on that edge coverage. Now that site has to work really, really, really hard in the 700 megahertz band to provide that service, and that's where you run into the capacity issues.
So the variations in your charts at the 700 megahertz levels, the spikes that I saw, they were primarily in the October, November timeframe for each of the beta sites and the alpha sites. I think that's when it was. Is
Yeah, I
that-
mean, 700 megahertz in general is pretty much over the threshold.
I should actually look at.
It's the, yeah, the 2100 megahertz, I think, is what you're referencing, where once in a while it bounces above, but for the most part, it's below.
All right, you're right. I had it backwards.
It's okay, yeah. One important thing to say though is just because the 2100 is below that line, site development takes a long time, so we need to be very cognizant of, hey, we're starting to get close to that utilization. Yes, we may not be there yet, but by the time we get a site through development, maybe we will be, and we need to stay ahead of that. So just because it's under the line right now and may not be affecting service or dropping calls at this time, we need to make sure that our sites don't ever reach that condition, which these sites clearly have on the 7.
And you said something about coverage during the time of the year. Hit me with that again.
So
Lead coverage or
seasonality, I think, is what I spoke to earlier, and basically that's just gonna affect your signal strength. And that's due to foliage. It sounds silly, but that's really it. So leaves with the moisture, when the RF hits it, RF gets absorbed to a certain degree. Obviously, it still penetrates through to a certain degree, but you know, you may notice that in the winter months, you have better coverage in areas where, hey, I was here in the summer and I didn't have good coverage. So it leads to those kind of conditions.
Doug,
No, I'm sorry,
go ahead.
I just wanted to, this is a great conversation. In a way, I'm sorry you have to go through it because obviously these guys do this all the time. So then it's pretty high level stuff. I want to just step above a little bit and just make a couple observations on these issues. One, that capacity issue is an important issue. That capacity issue, and it goes to something you said, Mr. Chairman, in the beginning, which you referenced densification. And in Mr. Chamberlain's letter, he does point out the issue about, well, if you have capacity, that doesn't necessarily mean a significant gap. And what he's getting at is that in one of the FCC documents, the rulings, they basically said, hey, coverage gaps, it's just one example of need. You could also have capacity as need. However, in full disclosure, there was a district court in New York that said, we don't buy that. So that's probably what he's getting at, saying, hey, capacity cannot be your sole reason for need. And my point that I'm making is, it's a dual purpose site. We have significant coverage gaps without capacity issues at all. And that would address Mr. Chamberlain's basically.
So let's explain the difference.
Yeah,
So the capacity is, you are in an area where each site has X number of channels it can use, and each channel, provides service to X number of people. I don't know the specific numbers, maybe these gentlemen do. But the point is that at some point, say the Kerhonkson site, you have more than 3,000 people using the site at a time. Don't quote me on that number, but the site can only handle less than that. So you have a situation where your capacity, you're over capacity, you can't take new calls. So if someone tries to access that network, that antenna, it's gonna fail.
So
So you have-
capacity is the ability to reach a certain number of customers, and coverage is the ability to reach a certain area.
So.
you could have coverage, but not capacity.
Yeah, let me put it that way. So you can have areas where you have sufficient coverage, but capacity is already maxed
In other
out.
words, you can reach aerially, but you don't have enough capacity for the people.
Yeah, if anyone's ever been to like a high capacity venue, you know, sometimes if the system within the stadium or wherever you are doesn't have enough capacity to support the users, you'll look on your phone, you'll have full bars, 5G, and then you'll go to check your Facebook and it just spins, or you go to make a call and it takes forever, doesn't connect, call fail.
So the bars represent coverage.
Typically, yes.
Okay,
Which is the aerial.
so
That's like a signal strength.
you have coverage, but you don't have capacity.
That's
All right, so Scott, come back to your talk of your description of densification.
So, yeah, so when I read Mr. Chamberlain's most recent letter, he focuses very much on capacity. As a cynic, I think he's doing it intentionally to avoid the coverage issue. Because he just makes a reference of like, oh, they have tiny coverage gaps. They're not tiny coverage, they're 3 miles long on 44 and 55. And kind of going to the conversation, I think Dave and the chairman will have before, well, what's significant? Well, there is case law and that I can provide that to you. And a 3 mile gap is without question a significant gap which needs to be covered. We have federal law on that. So I just think that, yes, you're talking about capacity. And Brendan, you have a capacity issue, but what Mr. Chamberlain is saying is, well, maybe that doesn't totally justify need under the law. We're saying, but look to the coverage issue because we have major coverage problems. Is what I'm trying to point you to. The second thing about Mr. Chamberlain's letter, you're talking about all these issues about the FCC broadband maps. I'm not so sure that he disagrees with what we said. Because he didn't really respond to the issue about 350 meter bins. He did, in fact, he even said, okay, maybe the FCC maps have some limitations, but he didn't really go into it. So my view of that is, he hasn't refuted it. You know, there's a major difference between 20 meter bins and 350 meter bins, as these gentlemen have spoken about. So maybe he doesn't disagree with what our arguments are on that.
So, Doug, could you comment on, based on what you know of their Forsk Apple model? Are they using 25 meter information or 350?
Honestly, are they in?
I'm asking you for,
I would be shocked if they were using 330. I haven't used the tool, but 20 meters is typical from what I've seen. But
what are you using?
Yeah, I'll tell you right now, the maps that were generated in our engineering necessity case here use 20 meter data.
Okay. Okay, the board have, I have more questions. The board have any?
Zorian had a question, did you?
Yeah, but finish with the question.
Okay, we talked about the over under capacity.
Rick, just 1 second.
Yep, are we having problems with?
I just can't get it to go back up.
It cut out before.
I can get it to go left and right.
I've had that problem before when I was here. I think it has to be physically.
Physically, but
Gonna get a letter.
But I did it the last time.
I would say I can't reach that.
See if we have a letter.
Do we have a broomstick?
Yeah, if we have the flagpole. I don't know. if I
Yeah,
really
hold
want
on,
to.
bro. Hold on.
How's that?
A little more. There you go.
Well,
That's better.
yeah.
Cool.
Cool.
Pleasure.
Oh, God, super. Careful. Don't stay in the middle.
No broken ankles.
I really have a lawsuit.
Talk to me, Doug, talk to me about dropped calls versus no call versus the FCC data being based upon, as I understood it, in-house versus standing outside, sitting outside in your car. Do you have any insights to this? No drop, no call, drop calls?
Sure, let me start with the issue of where coverage is being measured, right? So nowadays, the vast majority of cell phone usage is not, out in the open. Standing on the street, walking down the street. That's a very small part of it. You're either in your car in your house, in a restaurant, in a store, that's where the vast majority of usage happens, and that's
And
why,
that's based on data?
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I'll take
I
that.
mean, you just think about, everyone here, think about where you use your phone. That's why.
Well, if you're in New York City, you're,
For sure, New York City, it's
Right.
probably 90+% are not on the street. But that's why in Brendan's maps, you've got those different colors, right? The weakest color just basically looks at outdoor coverage. Then the next level up looks at, you know, in-car coverage and, you know, lighter kind of buildings. And then as you get higher, you can penetrate further into buildings, right? So the stronger your signal, the more people you can cover, not only from a geographic area, but from where people are actually using their phone. Okay? The issues of drop calls versus incompleted calls. Basically, if you're able to get through to the network and then you lose your call, that's generally what's considered a drop call. But you could also have a call failure where, kind of what Brendan was describing before, where you try and make a call and you can't even access the network. That's not counted as a drop call. Right, so that, and you've got plenty of problems with that. In addition to drop calls, in addition to calls that are poor quality, that people hang up before they drop.
Right.
That is not recorded as a drop either. So the thought about using drop calls as a metric for determining the quality of service is just really not, it doesn't tell you the full picture.
well, I may not give you the full picture, but it's part of the picture.
Part of the picture.
Why would you not include it?
Because we can already tell by our capacity utilization that,
Trying to talk a little louder?
sorry, we can tell already by our capacity utilization, which we've given, that those problems are happening that way, so it's. We have this data.
Is there data, so you're saying your model takes that into consideration?
So this isn't a model, this is data recorded from these on-air sites.
Oh, so those charts,
This is historical data from users in the network.
all right, so that's not coming out of that not coming out of the magic
No,
box.
The other issue with dropped calls would just be, let's say you had dropped call data. What are you gonna do with it? What threshold is the appropriate threshold? There are a few cases that talk about it, but what if we said, okay, the drop calls, and I'm not saying this is the case, but let's say if we had 90% drop call rate. Maybe most people would say, okay, that's pretty significant, I don't know. What if it was 5%?
You have the data though.
Right, but if you get the data, what are you gonna do with it?
Well, wouldn't that help with assessing the the coverage in a particular area?
Not for our purposes, no.
I think ultimately, I think that's a decision for the board to make in terms of need, but I think what your better argument is the one you just made it 2 minutes ago, which is that if you had 5% drop calls, that's indicative of a higher percentage of problematic calls. The calls that people hang up on because they get upset with it, or calls that otherwise never get through. And isn't that your better argument than what number are we gonna use? Because if this were all reduced to numbers, the board would have to choose one at some point.
Well, I think the better argument is the one that I haven't made yet, but it's basically that. When a town municipality like this doesn't have a requirement in your code, if your code doesn't require drop calls, again, federal case law says. You can't require it. It's that clear. The carrier gets to decide what the need justification is. I've actually provided the case, it's in the record.
Was that
I'll provide it
that
again.
one page? You did provide me something.
It's the Crown Castle Fiber v. Town of Webster, which was 2024. I don't have the site on the top of my head, but it's definitely on the record. I'm making a list of things to
Okay.
provide.
That's district court.
Correct.
So sit here, Scott, on one page.
So just
It had to do with,
No, but I may have,
it had to do with the Village of Floral Park,
No, what's the basis?
Oyster Bay Zoning Board of Appeals.
there are a couple of Oyster Bay cases that, but
Well,
it,
You led off by saying federal law interpreting the Telecommunications Act of 96 does not require the submission of drop call or drive test data
correct.
to determine the need for a site. Is that what you're referring to?
It's possible that if in that there's a citation to Crown Castle Fiber, the town of Oyster Bay, a 2024 case, then I refer to that, yeah.
Just to jump past the prospect of we're gonna be talking past each other again, since it's a district court, are there any just other cases in a different district, in a different circuit that are against this?
Not aware of any, but I haven't researched that specifically, so I'm not aware.
So you're saying that because it's not in our code, we can't ask for, no, you're not saying it, you're
Because
saying.
we're not asking for it, they're providing.
You know, that's what the case is. The court basically said, listen, if a local code requires that information to be provided, it should be provided. But the court then says, but if it's not required in the code, there's no requirement, and the carrier gets to decide how to demonstrate need. And I know that may sound counterintuitive, but it's.
Yeah, why wouldn't you want to give it to us?
Oh, because you have to interpret it then, and we know that we have a need for this.
But it makes your case stronger.
It may or may not. I mean. I
Well,
shouldn't say
which is
that.
it? Does it make it stronger or does it not make it stronger?
Well, it depends, like, what if we had, because the cases on this issue are far and few between, in a sense. So there's no, I don't think there's a standard as to really what is need in terms of a dropped call. So you might see a percentage of dropped calls and you might have 7 different opinions about whether that demonstrates need.
But again, you've made a reasonable argument that the drop calls underestimate the percentage of the problem, the percentage of problematic calls.
Yeah, I think that's what Doug was saying.
So once,
Yeah.
But why would, wait a minute, why wouldn't I assume that your inability or you're not wanting to give me the drop call information is indicative of that? It's not, it doesn't support your case for lack of capacity or lack of coverage.
I'm not sure I'm following that code.
Suppose you have no drop calls. Why would you give me the data that says no drop calls? Then I'm gonna look at it and say, well, what the hell you need another tower for?
Well, because we have a significant gap in service of 3 or 4 miles long that we've shown you. And that in and
how
of
could you have a
itself,
gap in service with no drop calls?
well, you might not, because if you have no signal, you're not gonna have any calls. You can't access the
Yeah, but
network.
if I'm driving, if I make a call, I'm driving around and they go into your 3 or 4 mile area that's, you know, it's gonna take me 10 minutes to drive through, the call's gonna get dropped, isn't it?
You're not even gonna be able to
On
make
the
the.
tower.
If you
Maybe
Yeah.
call where I got
If you
service.
originate the call in an area that you can originate the call in, sure.
That's what you know, on our roads, that's the situation we're dealing with. There's calls originating at all points on the road, and if I'm outside the area and then I drive into it, it's gonna get dropped. It's posing a 3 or 4 mile long gap. That's not gonna, call's not gonna survive that.
No. No.
So why would, so if we. Let's just say, that's a given. You have a coverage problem, so why wouldn't you give us the information to substantiate that coverage problem? It's not,
Because we feel we've given you the information.
Doing it with RF.
you didn't give us the drop calls.
Yeah, but there's no requirement that drop calls is a requirement. I mean, where does that come
Why
from?
shouldn't I suspect you don't want to give it to me because it's not a good story for your,
It's deeper than that. There's some proprietary information that Verizon Wireless generally doesn't want to give up. And that's some of the information that they have made a decision on a national basis that we prefer not to do it. Because they have invested significantly in these models and using capacity data, and that shows them there's an absolute need. That's why they do it.
do these models have to be licensed by the FCC? Do they check them and they say, yeah, okay, this is, you're not playing with the numbers, you're not playing with the model?
Are you referencing the models that are used to create the maps?
The model that you use to create the need for another tower, which is the Forsk Atoll
So the
model,
map, yeah,
right?
yeah, okay.
So let me just jump way ahead. I think it's my next to last question, or last question. How do I know that the model hasn't been jury rigged to give you the result that you want? Like, who's adjudicating that the model is being done properly?
Well, I think that's why you hired someone like Mr. Fishman. to review
Well,
the
Mr. Fishman just said that he doesn't. He doesn't know the inner guts of it. I'm talking
Right.
about,
Right, but, right, I don't know, I can't guarantee that everything is done. You know, exactly the way it optimally should be done, but based on the maps that I see. It seemed reasonable to me, because I've reviewed. Hundreds of these things, if not more. It doesn't look like there's any big fishing going on there. That's all I can say, you know, I've seen enough of these that. I believe what I see, and again, the insight I had years ago when I actually saw an engineer using it. Was. You know,
because one of the arguments that the opposition has made in both of their letters.
Yeah.
And in Comey's letter also, I think, was how could you or Brendan say that the models are fine and if you don't know if you're not willing to tell us what's in there, nobody can check to see what's in there. Nobody's checking to make sure there isn't any monkey business going on in there. You know, how could you, Doug, as a third party, attest to the accuracy of the model when you don't know what's in the model?
it's a good question, I just know. The inputs to the model in terms of the tower locations and the antennas and all that, but in terms of what's. What are called the propagation parameters that are in there and how they're adjusted. You know, generally, you know, I don't get visibility of that level of detail, and even if I did. It would be hard to make a conclusion.
Doug, do you have experience with other cell tower licensing at the local level, proceedings such as this one?
You mean other,
Other towns, other
Yes,
applications? To what extent does the use of a model like this with whatever opacity it carries, is that typically used to determine whether or not there's a need?
Yeah.
And to what extent is this sort of kicking the tires that we're doing on this, help assisted by the commenters? To what extent are we sort of doing what's typically done? What extent are we going beyond it? What extent are we basically putting them through their paces in terms of what other the typical licensing procedures that you would see in your practice?
you are going beyond what's typically done. And I understand why in this case. But. Again, I've been through this quite a few times, I've seen maps like this quite a few times. There's a lot of similarities in what I see. You know, the variations due to rain and due to all that. All show the way that I expect them to show on here.
And AT&T would be making a similar type of
Similar,
presentation?
they use a different tool, but it's the same idea. These tools are the engineering tools that they use to do their jobs, to make sure that the network is, you know, is built out and performing the way it's supposed to be.
And what states are you familiar with, local permitting in?
New York, New Jersey.
Just, again, for the legal perspective. The case law historically says these models are what has been used. That is, in fact. I've never provided dropped call data in 30 years of doing this. That doesn't mean dropped call data hasn't been provided in other places, other states. But the point is that the federal cases will show. It's these types of models that are used, and it's the industry-wide standard, it's the accepted standard. And Verizon Wireless has zero. They're not going to put parameters in there that don't match their network. Because why would they spend $500,000 or more on a site that's not needed? That's just the common sense business reason. I mean, we don't build sites we don't need, okay? We don't waste that type of money. But having said that, you still have the technical justification for you, but that's what I always tell people. We're not doing this just for the fun of it. There's a need for us.
And I'm questioned out. The board have any?
I have comments. Reading the last letter of Mr. Chamberlain, it seems to me the main argument is about proving the modeling of the signal. And basically validation of the software, validation of the results. And this is, to me, it's main core of that letter. He basically saying, prove it to me by, again, providing drop data. And I am coming from engineering work, and one time of my career, I was working for nuclear power plant seismic stress analysis. And our software, obviously, we couldn't validate the result every time, but there was a center which particularly ran validation of the software, was experiment, and they proved that software was valid. In your case, you already have a data, but you don't want to disclose them, but prove with those data that your modeling is correct. That's essentially what whole argument of main argument of Mr. Chamberlain. All other stuff is kind of discussable. You have this opinion, that opinion. But he basically asking, all right, you have analysis, prove it that it's valid. That's essentially my comment. So what prevents you? Why is it so proprietary data? You can show some of that. I don't know why is it proprietary. So that's my question.
I'll, in terms of the why is it proprietary, I'll talk to the people that make those. I won't get to them, but I'll talk to the people that can talk to them to find out what their rationale is so they can provide a response.
And whatever I read says, drop data is rated quality, drop data rate, quality, drop call rate. It's one of the main parameters of the quality of the network. So why it's not present here? Why you hesitant to compare that with your result and say, all right, this is proof that our analysis is correct? That's essentially my question.
I will get some information on that for you.
Doug, I want to come back to you. In your first report from February, you analyzed these, essentially you analyzed this package. And one of the things that you, well, more than this, but one of the things that you made comments about was the adequacy of towers at 100 feet, 120 feet, 145 feet, and 160 feet.
Right.
You said at 100, don't bother building it. But at every other height, obviously 160 or 165 would be optimum, but it would be fine at 120. Speak to that again.
So I think I said something like there wasn't a significant difference at once you got to 120 and above. I think my feeling, and I don't remember what Brendan said in his report, to be honest with you, that was a while ago, is if you're going to be building a new tower, you want to build it so that other carriers can use it for co-location, right? Because you want to minimize the number of these towers in your town. So if the minimum height that you can use is, let's say, 120 feet, and you build it at 120 feet, chances are that the other carriers are going to have a similar minimum height, and it won't want to co-locate, or won't be able to co-locate on that because they're below the tree line, they're below whatever was causing those propagation issues. So again, I don't remember your rationale, but I would say, okay, 120, 140, 160 are good. I'm comfortable going down to 140, which will leave some room for the two additional towers to be at 130 and 120. In case they need to improve coverage also in the area to allow co-location.
So your comment about 120 was anticipating that there would be co-location
Yes.
as opposed to. Well, if they were the only ones using the tower,
Right,
120 would be fine, but
Right.
you're saying that what are you gonna do if AT&T comes?
Exactly.
It was also.
Then that would be another tower in the town.
Right, and you don't want that.
But it
So,
was also based on, are you recommending or observing that 120 is a good height? Because you're also observing that 100 is what they really need and you're bumping it up 20 feet to provide
No.
more capacity?
no, the 100 was not good. My comment was 120 and above, there weren't really significant improvements. Which, yes, from 100 to 120, there were significant improvement, but then you're above whatever the terrain is.
So even apart from co-location, 120 is the lowest, in your view, is the lowest level where they get the coverage they need.
Yes,
Believe, Scott, didn't you say that you didn't care about co-location? It wasn't your concern? In the previous meeting?
I may have said it, hopefully not too snarky, but like, we don't care about co-location in the sense that we don't care if people come or not. However, we will design the tower so that if co-locators do come, it's available to them.
Peter, Doug's point is that we should care about co-location,
No,
because it
that's-
reduces the number of towers.
No, I understand that, yeah.
But they can go 145 for co-locate, right?
Well, not if the tower is built at 120.
Yeah, they can increase, right?
well,
Or it's structurally.
if the tower is designed in such a way.
So it's a maximum.
That structurally it can support that and you build it initially to 120 and then add on. You
Plus,
can do that.
Okay.
they're going to abandon that right. They're going, but by lease, they're gonna abandon that right.
Well, I think we did, I think. We
Well,
said we
you
will
get-
not, the landlord said you cannot go higher than 145.
Oh, so if it was 120, the right would still be there to go to 145?
Yes,
140?
I think that basically
Okay.
that's the maximum height of towers. I think the concern of the board was. Well, maybe you should consider something taller than 145 if they have that right under the Spectrum Act. So what he said, the landlord will limit that. They can do that as a property right.
So that's interesting. If we were to suggest that the board was to suggest that we want 120, but build it for co-location at a higher, up to 140, that would avoid the instance where somebody else could come in and build a whole new town.
Yeah, but then, right, then you're going through this,
You're
a
going
similar
through this thing.
ordeal as you know.
We're going
as
through all this all over
AT&T
again.
comes,
Right, but
I'm
it-
sure you wanna.
And
That's a no.
I don't know if I agree that 120 is good for Verizon.
It was my opinion.
No, I know. I wanna make, I have to get that out there.
Well, you work for Verizon, so I would,
Yes, so
are you speaking ex officio?
that's a big word.
Could I actually
Um,
ask a question about the height? So would it be appropriate for me to use on this document, for me to use pages 32 through 35?
Yes.
36, when we start talking about height differentials and
Yes.
coverage. Because I'm glad you brought up the point about 120, because and would you also agree that these are the only maps that you've provided that show that information? I believe so, but I just want to
I
confirm.
can't hear you,
The
Jim.
only maps that show the coverage at that height,
Yeah,
yes.
I want to make sure I'm using the correct maps.
Yeah, so the section labeled height justification is basically meant to convey, you know, why we need what we're asking for.
Yep, so
But just map of 145 or it doesn't say.
it has various, it has 120, 140.
Yeah, yeah,
160.
yeah.
Sure.
So when they use,
41.
if it's using 120 or 140, they're referring to the antenna center line. The tower height is really 125. That's still, it's either 125 foot tower or 145 foot tower.
So I reviewed these and I see that you also have areas 1, 2, 3, and 4 called out. In my review, it appears that the only material difference in coverage between 120 and 140 is in areas 1 and 4. areas 3, 2, and 3. Based on what I'm looking here, I can't see a material difference.
Yeah, so I think we need to consider, and it's a little hard to see on these maps, between the orange and the yellow, but I think we need to consider. The color tiers, right? So yes, you see color in those areas, but at what level, right? So basically, if it's orange, like take for instance, area number 2. On 120, that area circled is mostly orange, meaning 0 in building coverage.
So I asked maybe back in September for some additional information, and I don't believe anything was ever submitted. So I'm working off of what I have available. And I can't necessarily see those differences. The only. So, I mean, I guess I can do it a word.
Can you create a map to separate orange color? Because what
Jen,
you see.
If you look at the maps on the computer, the
I
original,
couldn't find the file, where I couldn't find it, and I looked in the Google.
you know where it is? It's in that big document. 650 page,
Overview document.
it's the big 650 page document.
Initial.
It's page 238 in that document. Right, is that
And-
238?
Somewhere around there.
Let me see if I can find that.
It was.
I went through this,
I'm impressed with it.
And I do think
Well,
that.
tell me so that I can print it.
I think when evaluating site, there is some important information missing. I do think that 700 megahertz coverage at the various sites would be beneficial, and that's something that I can.
192 to 238.
in that document under narrative. It's like the fourth document down, it says 177 megabytes and it's 650 pages. These pictures that we took were done on were not done directly from the computer. The original had orange in it, and I made the copies from that, so you had some bleeding between the yellow and the orange. If you look at the original, I think you'll see the orange.
I need a minute. I'm gonna hold.
What,
Further
what is the date? What is the date? Was it fun?
That was one of the initial.
So,
What's the date on that document?
2025-9/17.
9/17?
what, 17?
9/17.
It's
It's in the narrative section.
238.
Go to the file,
Yeah, it has September 18th as the date uploaded.
go to review.
No, it's under application,
It's under app-
proposed site plan, and then narratives. It's the second one down.
You can search for it.
And it's page 190,
193 to 238.
I'm sorry, what's the name of the document again?
HVR_ expanded narrative package.
Stacy, can you repeat that? It's under proposed site plan.
Under proposed site plan and then underneath narrative, it's the second one down. It says HVR expanded narrative package with EAF. It's dated 9/18 and it's 177 megabytes.
and you gotta go to page,
And it's page 193.
look up at the top
On
of,
the, yeah, on the top, you can put, it says page whatever number out of 650, I think it was. You can type the page number into it rather than scrolling.
What was the page number?
193.
I got it. It's still loading now.
And to get to the specific ones you were talking about, Jennifer, it's page 219, starts at 219. Focus areas.
Oh, this is much better.
you okay? You got it, Jen? So I just, while Jennifer's looking for that, I just wanna go back to what you said, Doug. What you said about the 120 was assuming there'd be one array at 120. Anything below that, co-located below that, is for Schnuggen.
The word.
It's a technical term, isn't it?
Again, based
I don't know
on,
what his book
based
is.
on this data, right? That's my interpretation.
Okay. And, but Brendan, you're saying that Verizon doesn't like 120.
Yeah, we believe that we've submitted, in the height justification section, we provide a apply at 120 and at 140. And we believe the differences within the areas that we highlighted are significant enough to warrant being at 140 versus 120.
Well, that makes sense.
Do you agree with that, Doug?
I mean, there are differences. To me, it's not significant, but it's not my network, so.
The key differentiator here is gonna be that in-building coverage to the residences in the area.
You want,
In-building coverage to the residences within the areas that we've identified. So at 120, we may get outdoor coverage on the 2100 megahertz, but inside. It's not gonna cut. So,
how can you tell that? I mean, your model tells you that?
yeah,
The
based
model
on
that
the
we-
color thresholds, so basically. At the signal levels defined at each color level, there's gonna be an expected level of service. So again, white space, no coverage, no service. Orange, rural highway. Again, subject to seasonality, fading, conditions, and then yellow, light construction, so residential homes, so we're really kind of looking for that yellow color. Green would be, heavier construction like the resort. You can basically expect the service to work within those areas as
So-
defined.
So you're rattling off these things, and I'm not quite sure where you're getting them from.
Sorry, I've just, so they're defined on page, I believe it's 15, let me double check.
All right, so look at page 32, which I think is where Jennifer was to begin with. Page 32. You got dark green, light yellow, and then orange.
Mhm.
Right? And you've got RSRP levels. -75, -85, -95, -105. Explain that. How did you say, well, that is okay for outside, but not okay for inside?
Sure.
How do I know that from those numbers?
Sure, on page 15, it defines basically the service levels you can expect for each color. So, orange. So
Alright.
greater than or equal to 105,
Okay, I see it.
okay?
Okay.
And just to add on. You need the stronger signal coverage to get in your car into the building, right? Because in penetrating through your car, through the building here, you're gonna get a loss of power from the signal.
And
So
you,
you need to be able to overcome and hit some minimal level.
and the highest signal level is described by the dark green,
Yes.
Yep,
a -75.
greater than or equal to, yes.
Right.
Okay. Jen, do you see that?
Yeah,
Is it coming out orange on
it
the,
is, it doesn't look like a major difference for me, that's my personal opinion.
it certainly doesn't look like a major difference if you use the copies that I made from
It's look better.
on that, it doesn't, yeah.
Really?
Well, Scott, when we talked about 120, you were happy with that, it seemed. You can,
I think I said I was, it's dependent upon him. I said that
okay,
ultimately it's up to him.
but if we only give you 120, then it's 120,
I guess that's one way to look at it.
huh?
I guess that's one way to look at it.
Well, the board's gonna have to make a decision. Well, it's gonna have to make a decision, either no, 120 or 140. 45.
Right. It'd be 125 or 140.
Rick, why don't we gather the information from them that we need and then.
At this. Well, the information, all right, so let's go through. Anybody have other questions? The information that I heard that we need is legal information for you to take a look at.
No,
the case.
all the facts that they can give us, but debating them with them at this point on, that's what we're gonna do, I think. Is
Well, I think we have all the, I don't know. We
I'll
have,
get you all, I took a list of the different.
Yeah, the
cases.
legal stuff be
Like
very helpful.
Three things, at least 3 topics, I believe, and I said I would provide, so I'll provide those too.
Yeah, particularly the question as to whether you have the right to your own network or whether
Yes.
there's reliance on other networks, that one was
Yep.
significant.
as far as the added data, I think it's all here. It's just how it gets interpreted.
Well, that's, we probably should have conversations with Doug at some point.
You wanna have it now?
Might
as well have it now.
When you're ready to move on to the agenda.
We have nothing else on the agenda, although we did say we're going to have it. you need to give us some legal advice,
Right.
which would be a separate session
Is
altogether.
does anybody have any other questions or need
Yeah,
for?
I just want to be perfectly clear from Brendan's perspective and then also Doug's perspective. That. Can you say whether Verizon cannot get or can get coverage from the other existing tower? Can we just say that?
We cannot provide additional coverage from the existing towers that we are already located on.
Okay. And Doug, in your opinion, do you feel like they've provided justification for need?
Yes.
Thank you.
Doc, do you concur with their? I agree with what Brendan said, but do you concur with what he said in terms of they can't add additional arrays to the existing
Yes,
because of signal interference?
yes.
Peter's question him.
Yeah.
Okay, so. Peter, any other?
No, not right now.
Sorry, Hans,
I'm good.
Jen? Soria?
No.
I mean, aside from us, you're gonna get us a write-up as to why you won't tell us what's in the black box.
I'm gonna, about the drop, yes.
I mean,
By the way, again, they're the engineers, but I've been sitting around these guys for long enough. That's just one like parameter. It's the drop calls. I'm not saying he said it, but to the extent that Mr. Chamberlain suggests that drop calls is the way to definitively define need. I think we could conclusively say that we disagree with that, because there are so many other factors are contained in this report, but I will get.
Well, I don't
information-
agree with it being the only factor.
Right.
I just don't understand why you wouldn't want it out there if it favors your case. The fact that you're not giving it to us gives me a different impression.
There's a second question. Not all data is,
Equally important.
no, not all data is an argument is meant to be, to prove a case. Sometimes I guess the question is, to what extent is that data fairly indicative of the problem? In other words, to what extent is it reliable as a scientific matter?
Well, if it's not reliable, why, just give it to us.
But it's one
No,
of,
because-
it's one of the parameters.
But if it's not reliable,
Well, you're saying it's so minuscule, it's so de minimis in its effect, all the other data is overwhelming.
I want,
I didn't say that.
we actually have an RF expert here, so I'd like to.
Yeah.
Is this drop call data reliable data in terms of the science of determining need, if there is such a thing?
It's a data point.
How good is it and how important is it and especially in light of the data that we
It-
otherwise
it's
have?
Not nearly as important as what they were laying out. I don't understand why Mr. Chamberlain's making such a big deal about it.
Do you feel in your experience that the board would be unreasonably firm ground in making a decision as to their need without that particular data point?
I don't think there is a need. Again, question was asked to me before, did they prove their case for need? And I believe they did. I think the drop call data, I don't think it's gonna help or hurt their case.
Mr. Chamberlain is an academic expert with a great deal of knowledge of the scientific inputs and analyses of these things. He's hired by commenters with a particular perspective, and so he's going to do what a scientific expert for advocates will do, which is to pick up on what the best arguments are and make a scientific case for them. He's probably done it very, very well, but we need to have a perspective on the entirety of the case before us, particularly if we run the risk of, investigating the scientific basis of every point that's raised. These decisions are made all the time. And so at some point, we take the applicant's presentation, we take the commenter's presentation, we take our experts' analysis of it, and we make our judgment.
Well, what I thought I heard you say, Doug, and confirm. In the order of things, it's not as important as all the other data.
Sure.
When you believe that I think this is the question Counselor asked. If we held up our decision or made a decision solely on drop calls, the absence of drop calls, we'd be practicing, we'd be malpracticing.
That's not the decision. The decision is we have a lot of data. We have a lot of, we've had commentary. We
I want to
have.
know the specific importance of drop calls from Doug Fishman's point of view.
It's of minimal importance. in
Okay.
this case.
But don't they validate the model?
No, drop calls do not.
Why?
If you collected some physical drive data. You can use that to help tune the model. To tune the parameters, and I believe. That Verizon periodically does that anyway. So that the model gets tuned over time to be more and more accurate. That only benefits them, right? They don't want to make decisions. Based on the model showing there's a gap and there's no gap, and they're gonna spend $500,000 and they're not gonna see any improvement in system performance, right?
That's correct.
So can you reinforce the message that your what did you say was on the side signal? Or you're essentially validating, provide another support that your model is validated, that it's sound. That essentially is the question.
So maybe if you guys made some sort of statement about. How you tune your model. I think I alluded to it in one of my letters.
It's written somewhere between the line, but I think
Yeah.
the strongest statement. In absence, if no drop call data are available. We need to say this is modeling.
And this is how we.
This is proof that modeling is valid.
Can you provide that, Scott?
We can see what we can do in terms of that, because. You know, again, if you just read Mr. Chamberlain's letter, you think we're trying to pull the wool over your eyes. We're not. No one wants our modeling to be more accurate than we do. Because we don't want to waste money. And Verizon has a national program where so we'll see what we can provide.
Yeah,
But please understand, in fact, there's, I
Our-
don't know,
our
Dave,
job-
do you know Ron Grafe or of him, Ron Grafe?
Yeah.
So he's an engineer, but he's probably not doing it anymore. Very well respected. 10-15 years ago, when I was doing a site with him, his response to us was the Verizon model that they use is the gold standard. Neither here nor there. I just want to convey to you that, you know, we want this model to be as accurate as possible. And we do constantly put new data in there to make sure that it reflects current conditions. And I'll see what we can provide.
And we just want to make sure by the
And I
bluntness of our
understand, you're just trying to
questions
verify.
that,
I get it.
okay,
I get it.
Because we need to consider another factor, okay? Except outside of the data, we also consider an environment and how community look at it. Because we need to take in consideration that factor, so which factor is more valuable, we need to decide, in order to make a decision.
I understand, and I will, you know, go to the people that I need to go to see what I can get for you.
all right.
Provide that verification.
So I think we're done for tonight in terms of, unless there's more questions, in terms of Doug's input to us. Brendan's input. Scott, you and I need to talk the next day or two about escrow. And also the items that Dave Church sent you, or I sent you, Dave Church's memo. And you've been sending some of it, if you recall, we're asking for soil data. And there's a host of other things. It's gradually coming in, and Stacy is getting it out to you as it comes in. But it's for the site plan, and I just want to make sure everything that's in the site plan portion of our code has been provided. And I guess the biggest thing we haven't seen yet is the real estate material.
If that's gonna take, I literally, we've been talking with him, Thanksgiving interrupted it a little bit. He's been authorized to move forward as of earlier in this week. His response to me was, kind of like Dave Church said, it's impossible to comply with the strict requirements of your code. It's simply not feasible to do. However, we have him doing some other analysis that he's gonna try to at least provide. I think maybe going towards some of Peter, your comments previously about, but what about more localized data? He's looking into that. So unfortunately, I'm hoping to have it in the next 3 weeks, but he says he's pretty busy, but I have his attention. He's got his check, so.
Okay,
Motivator.
just Yeah, before I forget, the next meeting that we will have you on the agenda for is next Monday, the 8th.
Yes,
There will be continuation of the public hearing.
Yeah.
And the board needs to discuss at some point when we close the public hearing. At what point do we do that? And then at what point do we begin to do seeker? So Scott and Brendan and Doug, unless there's anything else from your end or the board has any questions from them, our attorney wants to go into a session, attorney-client privilege session, which means everybody has to leave except for the board members. So that includes our consulting engineer, Stacy, and the public needs to leave while we have the consultation with the attorney.
Very quick question, it's not directly related about structure. You're designing structure for every site, or don't you have a standard design and basically applying everywhere? Yes.
They sent the. a
Right, I
design
saw it,
standard.
but I didn't open it, but is that for each site you design on structure?
that is, so each site's gonna be a little different because you have different subsurface. You know,
Right, but
around
I
it.
mean,
So your foundation may be different, obviously tower height's different. But the tower is generally the same, if it's a monopole, whatever height it's at. The overall design is very similar, the bolts go where they go and stuff like that, so that's what we use for our structural analysis. But yes,
Okay, so we're gonna take a break. Thank you, gentlemen. Public will have to leave for the
I have to
attorney-client.
leave. Do you want to adjourn the meeting?
If we need to vote after.
Okay, yes, you're right. I'll make a motion to go into attorney-client privilege meeting. Need a second? Jennifer seconding? Everybody?
I.
Aye.
and no more discussion after the meeting, after executive session
No,
on this.
you're done.
Thank you, thanks for listening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
And. Okay, essentially you sign all of that.
Here.
8:20.
So when do you adjourn?
8:20.
You just did.
We can adjourn.
So is the first
Just
motion and the
motion
second?
seconded by.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Roll